studies in higher education simply by his very prolific work as a researcher, as a scholar, as a thinker on issues of higher education. So Nico, as you know, is the director of the Center for Higher Education Plus, CHEC as we all know it, and coordinator of HERANA, the Higher Education Research and Advocacy Network in Africa. To all four speakers, welcome. Robert, Zebron, Liz, and Nico. We'll start, of course, with Professor Tusk.
So thank you very much, Chair, for the kind opportunity and the kind invitation to present my opening statement here. What I want to do, being the first speaker, I want to sort of touch base with you first and talk a bit about rankings in general, because people have the strangest notions about rankings. Either they focus on one particular ranking, or they have a very fuzzy idea where they pick elements from all kinds of rankings. So I think we need to be clear from the very start what actually we mean by a ranking, what kind of differences we have amongst the various ranking systems worldwide. I will introduce you through some of the methodological characteristics and features of the most important world rankings today, and I'll close with some, let's say, critical remarks on what I see as the general shortcomings of these particular high-profile ranking systems. Having said that, the first thing to note is, like I said, there's such a huge diversity of these ranking systems, and these are just the high-profile, most well-known ones. I think in total there are now 30 or 40 ranking systems. Many of them are international, like the ones here on the screen, but there are also national, regional, even topical ranking systems nowadays. So there's quite a choice out there. But in essence, they all more or less follow the same principles and adopt the same methodologies. So what I'll do here today, I'll touch base, I'll show you a bit more detail on 3 of those rankings. I'll focus on the Times Higher Education ranking, because that is probably by far the most popular and well-known one. I'll tell a bit about the QS ranking, which has some interesting, almost unique features. And finally, a bit about U Multirank, which is now seen as a sort of an alternative ranking system, very much driven by users and for students. Having this slide up here, perhaps I should point out that I initiated 2 of these ranking systems actually, the U Multirank one and the Leiden ranking, and still am actively involved in contributing data, thinking about strategy for these 2 kinds of ranking systems. So that is probably why I'm here today, actually. So a bit more detail, like I said, we'll focus on the Times Higher Education ranking as sort of the key example. They have started a couple of years ago and quite soon explored the possibility of focusing on particular regions, particular continents. And in 2015, they decided to, for the first time, to launch a ranking on African universities. And this has been annually updated ever since. It's only about the top 30 universities, so they've been highly selective, focusing only on those universities that are, let's say, research universities and more or less internationally oriented. So it is sort of the tip of the iceberg of all the higher education institutions, all the universities we have on the continent. The outcome is the following. Universities Cape Town is seen as the, let's say, the best university, between quotes, and it ranks 171 from, I think, almost 1,000 universities worldwide. So that is Cape Town being the #1 university in Africa. Then we have Witwatersrand, Wits University, somewhere in the 250 to 300 category. Stellenbosch follows, sitting at somewhere between 350 and 400, and the list goes down with KwaZulu-Natal and a couple of other universities from outside South Africa. So this, basically, if you start looking at this very first ranking, this is what we see. South African universities in the top, but not really in the top worldwide. They're sort of second-tier universities, and then some others from other countries follow. The interesting thing about this particular ranking system is that it is based on a composite indicator. And the composite indicator is determined by rankings, scores on 5 dimensions. And here are the 5 dimensions. There's teaching, there's research, there's citation, there's international outlook, and there's industry. Find these particular categories in most of these global rankings. They try to capture research, they try to capture teaching and training, and also some other features that define the modern comprehensive university. And if you look closer, you can see that each of these dimensions, these performance dimensions, have a number of indicators that determine the profile, the performance on one of these 5. I won't run through the details here, but what is important is that there are percentages, there are weights linked to each and every of these dimensions. So for in the case of teaching, it's a 30% weight, research 30%, citation impact, that's basically international scientific impact, another 30%, and the remainder 10% is split according to international outlook and industry income. So what they do at Times Higher Education, they combine all these scores, they apply the weights, and in the end, there is this one composite score that determines the ultimate ranking. And that is how Cape Town gets its score in this particular ranking system. There's a lot to be said about this system, and I will touch on it in my final slide, because this particularly the weighting is rather arbitrary, I would say. Okay, the thing is, and this is a new feature of this particular ranking system, but you can also find it in other ranking systems, they've started to become more focused on breaking down the data. And one of the ways of breaking down the data is by what they call subject areas. So basically these are the traditional monodisciplinary fields we all know, like the arts and humanities, there's education, there's law, psychology, and what have you. Why is that? Because the global ranking systems found out quite soon that lumping everything together across all fields of science doesn't make any sense. It's comparing apples with pears. So ultimately they started to break down the data according to this set of subjects. And we'll see that other ranking systems have followed suit. So this is one of the newer pervasive developments in the world of university rankings. Another one I promised to tell you about is the QS, which is in a sense a spin-off actually of the Times Higher Education ranking. There used to be one combined ranking system, but they have introduced some new features which add on and which are particularly interesting for some in some ways. The QS ranking system is very much driven by surveys. That is a good thing, because if you look closely you can see that there's an employer reputation survey as well. And this is one of the key features, the key added values of the QS system, that it at least tackles one of the key performance indicators, I would say, of a university, and that is employability and rate of employment. And this particular ranking is actually the only one that captures this really vital feature of a university performance profile. But again, you can see the percentages there, and so again, this university has a weighting system and ultimately produces just the one score, the one composite score that determines the ranking of a university. And if you look at the scores, you can see quite some similarity with the Times Higher Education ranking actually. Cape Town #1, sitting now at 191, Stellenbosch #2 at 361, then there's WITS, and then there's 2 universities from Egypt. More or less the same kind of ranking. And you'll find, if you look across many rankings, that this is the typical result. There is quite a degree of robustness actually in the ranking systems. You will always see the top 10, the top 20 are from the US, then there are universities from Europe, from Asia, and Latin America, Africa tend to be in the lower regions of these ranking systems. This is what you tend to find in most ranking systems. The one ranking system where I play an active role is U Multirank, whereas the previous two are very much commercially driven ranking systems nowadays, where the ranking basically is just a platform to sell information products. U Multirank is very much a public sector driven ranking system. It's funded by the European Commission and nowadays with 2 other organizations in Europe. And this particular ranking system is very much geared towards a wider range of audiences, including students. So this is very much meant for students, and also meant as a benchmarking tool where anyone can compare universities any way they like. So it's very much a flexible, user-driven ranking system. But if you look at the indicators, you'll see quite some similarity with the previous 2 ranking systems I showed you. There's a dimension again on teaching and learning with 4 indicators. There's a dimension on research performance. There's one on knowledge transfer, so this relates a bit to the industry income one I showed you earlier. That's part of the Times Higher Education system. There's a dimension on international orientation again. And finally, we have something, and that is unique for you, Multirank, on regional engagement. So that is what this particular ranking system brings to the audience. It isn't based on weighting systems, so there are no percentages here like in the previous cases. What the user does, this is freely available online. The user goes online, ticks a number of boxes, determines what kind of universities he or she wants to look at or compare. And this is one of the screens you'll find. So basically the user determines the number of universities and the type of universities that are of particular interest. And also the indicators, by the way, that are also customized towards the needs of the user. This particular university ranking system also has the option of picking particular subject areas, and here's just a screen dump, a screenshot of a couple of these subject areas. I think in total we have about 19 or 20 of them nowadays. So it's quite a different type of ranking system. And this is what you get. You don't get a ranking from the best to 1,000 or whatever as the least best. You get this kind of very transparent outlay of the information we currently have in the system. And you can see crosses there, and that's simply this missing data. So we're very outspoken, and we're very transparent and very honest in what we have. But we still feel that in spite of missing data, that this particular ranking system can add value compared to the other ranking systems out there. So my final slide, just in terms of an opening statement about my position here of rankings. Although I'm a producer or a contributor to global university ranking systems, I am relatively critical. There's a lot of room for improvement. And in spite of all our efforts to improve rankings in terms of user-friendliness and transparency, there are still a couple of things that are really general shortcomings. And I want to share these with you to sort of open up the discussion. First of all, I feel that there are many indicators and metrics out there that simply do not cover crucial features of a university's mission or profile. Like I said, I really would like to have more information on employability, on employment rate of universities. And there's not much out there except for the QS survey amongst employers. So we need much more in terms of coverage. The performance metrics themselves are sort of picked according to availability. We know some of them are biased, others are less relevant, and there are also quite a number of what I would call ambiguous indicators, where we really don't have a clear idea what they actually mean or represent. So that too is I would say, is a major shortcoming. The choice of metrics is not transparent. I know why particular indicators or metrics there are, but the audience, the users, don't. And this is again is seen as room for improvement, where we spell out why we picked a particular metrics and why we ignored others. The weighting systems, I already mentioned that. There's no rationale, there's no computational rationale why a particular dimension should have 40% rather than 30 or 50%. So that too is still seen as a major shortcoming that we have to address. Insufficient information on technical methodological details, limited reproducibility. Again, I feel there's not enough effort to help users in terms of educate them, make them aware of the advantages of ranking systems, but also very much of the limitations. And that too is still something that needs to be further developed. One of my final points is some ranking systems have no options for customization. My feeling is that proper ranking systems should be user-driven, and in order to allow users to customize the rankings, we of course need to offer them the facilities, online facilities, user-friendly interfaces, etc. And many of the large ranking systems simply lack that kind of user-friendliness, that kind of infrastructure. My final point, and perhaps even my most important one, is that most ranking systems provide sufficient information, and usually none at all, to users on how that explains the data and helps them to contextualize it. So that is the key thing. Many ranking systems are basically just numbers, but users need to have the numbers in order to create a convincing and meaningful narrative. And that is again something that all ranking systems fail so far, and we still have to put a lot of effort into that, reaching out to the user and handing over them proper information to use the information in the ranking systems to their benefits, to their advantage. Okay, thank you very much. That's my presentation, my opening statement.